under the hush of a midnight sky, the world rests. The air is cool, gentle, and quiet enough to hear the smallest stir of wind through the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a lone night bird calls, and then even that sound fades. In this stillness, the boundaries between dream and waking seem to soften, and imagination drifts like fog over an open field. The narrator's voice enters softly, almost blending with the night itself, guiding the listener toward a state of calm awareness. The listener is encouraged to slow their breathing, to feel the rhythm of their heartbeat syncing with the steady pulse of the earth beneath them. There is no rush here, no urgency, only the timeless act of listening, of opening the mind to what has always waited just beyond the edges of understanding. Above, the stars shimmer in their endless vigil. For as long as humankind has existed, we have looked upward and wondered. Every ancient people had their own stories about what lived beyond the dark sky: spirits, gods, ancestors, or distant travelers. The stars were never empty. They were always alive with meaning. The gentle light that filters from millions of miles away carries not just warmth, but questions. What if those lights are not only distant suns, but something, or someone, watching us back? As the listener drifts deeper into relaxation, these questions become less frightening and more comforting, as if the universe itself is quietly inviting them to wonder. The story unfolds like a slow wave, easing the mind into a contemplative rhythm. The narrator speaks of how, throughout time, strange lights have appeared in the skies, sometimes bright enough to cast shadows, sometimes soft as candle flames. Farmers, sailors, travelers, and kings alike once paused to gaze at these silent illuminations. Some called them omens, others believed them to be spirits. In many ancient cultures, the sky was a sacred realm, a mirror of the soul. When light appeared where no torch burned, people felt awe rather than fear. The sky was whispering and they listened. In the modern world, with our cities and satellites, it is easy to forget that same sense of intimacy with the heavens. Yet the mystery remains. Even today, when people step away from the noise and look up, that same question stirs within them. The narrator describes the moment before sleep as the perfect time to remember our oldest instinct, to wonder about what lies beyond sight. It is in this quiet threshold between wakefulness and dreaming that we are most open to the unknown. Here, under a calm voice and gentle rhythm, curiosity becomes a form of peace. The introduction continues with a serene sense of unfolding. The narrator reminds the listener that not all mysteries arrive with fear or chaos. Some come softly, like a breeze through open curtains. Gentle encounters, those subtle, fleeting moments when we sense something greater brushing close, have always been part of human experience. A faint shimmer in the corner of the eye, a whisper in an empty room, a light in the distance that feels almost alive. These are the quiet visitations that linger in memory, not because they terrify, but because they comfort. They remind us that there may be layers of reality we have yet to touch. The tone remains hushed and meditative, building atmosphere rather than tension. The story hints that what follows will not be a tale of terror or shock, but of reflection. It will move slowly, as dreams do, through moments in history and whispers of truth, exploring how the unknown has always walked beside us. The narrator suggests that perhaps what we call aliens, ghosts, or spirits are simply different names for the same presence, something vast, gentle, and patient, observing from just beyond the edge of understanding. As the first section draws to a close, the listener is fully immersed in tranquility. The night has become both setting and character, a living veil that hides mysteries older than time. The narrator invites the audience to continue the journey with an open heart, to drift deeper into curiosity rather than fear. The voice softens further, promising that each step forward will uncover a little more of that eternal dance between the seen and the unseen. Beneath the quiet hum of stars, the story is ready to begin. Long before the modern world gave names like UFOs or unidentified aerial phenomena to the lights that wander across the sky, Humankind had already been telling stories about visitors from above. Ancient eyes looked up at the same stars that we see tonight and found meaning there, threads of light woven into the tapestry of their faith, their fears, and their hopes. For them, the heavens were not an empty void. They were alive with voices, shapes, and signs. This section opens with that ancient awe, inviting the listener to drift through the corridors of time, where the first, gentle encounters between earth and sky were not about abductions or technology, but about reverence and wonder. In the year 218 BC, Roman chroniclers wrote of shields of fire floating over the city's horizon. To those who watched, these lights were not strange crafts or foreign machines. They were omens from the gods, messengers warning of great change. Centuries later, the Japanese would speak of mysterious Himmel no Hikari, or heavenly lights, gliding through the mists over mountain temples. The Aboriginal Australians told of ancestral beings who descended on beams of light to teach and heal. Each culture saw the same mysterious sky glow but interpreted it through its own lens of spirit and story. These encounters were peaceful, intimate, and filled with meaning. The unknown was not feared, it was sacred. As the gentle narration continues, the listener is invited to imagine torchlight flickering against ancient stone walls, priests watching the horizon for celestial signs, and storytellers describing beings who travel between worlds. The Hopi people of North America spoke of the Kachinas, star brothers who came to guide their ancestors, bringing wisdom and balance. In Greece, philosophers like Plato pondered whether the soul itself descended from the stars, suggesting that humanity and the cosmos were kin. The soft-spoken voice of the narrator moves through these cultures like a breeze through time, emphasizing how, for millennia, the human relationship with the sky was spiritual before it was scientific. The section unfolds with calm reflection, tracing how the language of belief slowly evolved. As societies grew more complex, so did their explanations. What once were gods riding chariots of flame became angels descending through clouds. Later still, as science took hold, those same lights were reimagined as possible visitors from distant planets. Yet beneath each interpretation lies the same truth. We have always felt that we are not alone. Historians often point out that when technology changes, so too does the shape of our myths. The ancient skyfire becomes the medieval saintly vision. The saintly vision becomes the modern UFO sighting. The phenomenon persists, but our explanations change like the phases of the moon. The narrator pauses here to let the listener breathe, letting these ideas settle like dust in still air. The calm tone reminds us that the human need to explain the mysterious is not just about evidence. It is about comfort. When early people saw lights dance across the heavens, they often believed the spirits of their ancestors were watching over them. To think of those who came before us as still present, still glowing faintly among the stars, brought peace to the heart. And perhaps, the narrator suggests gently, that same instinct remains with us today. The belief in extraterrestrial visitors may not be so different from the old faith in spirits. Both arise from the same quiet longing to feel connected to something beyond the limits of life. The narration continues with delicate rhythm, exploring how these ancient lights shaped rituals and art. Egyptian tombs depict winged discs descending from the sky. Celtic carvings show circles surrounded by rays, symbols that scholars have long debated as suns, portals, or celestial beings. In China's Han Dynasty, silk scrolls tell of dragons of light winding through the night. These are not merely myths, they are echoes of real experiences, filtered through imagination and belief. Anthropologists studying these accounts note how remarkably similar descriptions appear across continents and centuries. The shapes, round, glowing, moving silently, mirror what witnesses still describe today. The repetition across time hints at continuity, suggesting that humanity's encounters with the unknown may follow patterns deeper than history itself. The storyteller's voice then draws attention to how the transition from the sacred to the scientific changed the emotional tone of these encounters. Once, mysterious lights inspired reverence. Now they often provoke fear or fascination with technology. Yet perhaps the difference lies not in the phenomenon, but in our mindset. The ancient farmer who saw a glowing orb above his fields did not reach for a camera. He reached for prayer. His world was smaller, but his sense of belonging was larger. The modern witness, surrounded by screens and data, feels both empowered and isolated. The narrator invites the listener to imagine both perspectives and feel the timeless thread connecting them: wonder. Calmly, the narration introduces the idea that myths may hold fragments of forgotten knowledge. Some researchers suggest that these early stories might be metaphorical memories of real encounters, visits from travelers, explorers, or beings from beyond our perception. Others believe the lights were natural phenomena misunderstood: meteors, comets, or atmospheric plasma. Scholars of comparative religion argue that whatever their origin, the experiences were transformative. They shaped moral codes, inspired architecture aligned with the stars, and fostered humanity's first sense of cosmic belonging. Even in skepticism, there is respect for how profoundly these encounters influenced civilization's growth. As the section nears its close, the voice softens once more, bringing the listener back to the present. The same stars that guided the ancients now watch over us. We may use telescopes instead of temples, but the feeling is unchanged. The night sky remains a mirror for our questions, reflecting both our scientific curiosity and our spiritual yearning. The narrator concludes that perhaps the boundary between alien and divine has always been thinner than we imagine. To the Romans, fiery shields were omens. To us, they might be crafts. To a shepherd in the desert, a glowing sphere was the breath of a god. To a modern pilot, it's a radar blip with no clear explanation. Different languages for the same mystery. The listener is reminded to relax, to feel that sense of timeless connection. Each generation inherits the same wonder from those who came before. The lights of the past, the myths of the ancients, and the mysteries of the skies are not stories to solve, but songs to listen to. As the voice grows quieter, it invites the audience to imagine themselves lying beneath those same eternal stars, aware that the story of human curiosity did not begin with science, but with the simple act of looking up in awe. The ancient world fades gently into the distance, leaving behind the soft glow of memory and mystery. The next part of the journey will move forward in time, to when humanity's fascination with the sky met the instruments of science, and the first modern reports of visitors among the stars began to take shape. The 20th century arrived with the hum of engines, the crackle of radio waves, and a new sense that humanity was no longer bound to the earth. For the first time, we were learning to look at the sky not as worshippers, but as explorers. Yet, as telescopes sharpened and technology reached upward, the mystery above did not fade, it deepened. Strange lights continued to appear, now recorded not only in stories but on film, radar, and flight logs. The calm, meditative tone of the narrator guides the listener through the shift from ancient awe to modern curiosity, from mythology to investigation. Humanity had built machines to touch the heavens, but we discovered that the heavens still looked back. In the summer of 1947, the quiet desert of New Mexico became the setting for one of the most enduring mysteries in modern history. A rancher named Mac Brazel discovered scattered debris across his property, metallic fragments, strange foil, and lightweight beams unlike anything he had seen before. The local Air Force base investigated, and within hours the world was told that a flying disc had been recovered. Then, almost as quickly, the statement was withdrawn and replaced with another explanation. It was merely a weather balloon. The contradiction, delivered by official sources, ignited something profound in the public imagination. Calmly, the narrator describes the desert winds carrying whispers of rumor and disbelief. That single event, what we now call the Roswell incident, became the seed from which decades of fascination with UFOs would grow. The listener is invited to imagine the world in that moment, post-war America, filled with both optimism and anxiety. The Second World War had introduced radar, rockets, and atomic energy. Humanity's reach had expanded, but so had its fears. The skies were no longer symbols of gods and dreams, they were potential battlegrounds. The Cold War had just begun, and suspicion hung in the air like mist. When civilians or pilots reported unidentified objects, authorities listened carefully, uncertain whether they were seeing something extraterrestrial or something Soviet. The narrator explains this historical tension softly, noting how political secrecy and fear created fertile soil for myth to take root. Reports of strange craft multiplied. Pilots described metallic discs maneuvering at impossible speeds. In Washington state, a man named Kenneth Arnold saw a formation of 9 shining objects skipping through the sky, like saucers on water, giving birth to the term flying saucer. Newspapers printed the story with cautious excitement, and soon, sightings spread across the nation. Calmly, the narration lingers on the detail, how language shaped perception. Arnold had not said the objects were shaped like saucers, only that they moved like them, but the phrase took hold, creating an image that would dominate popular imagination for decades. The world was entering a new mythology, one written not in temples or scrolls, but in headlines. As more sightings occurred, governments began to take quiet notice. The U.S. Air Force launched a series of studies, Project Sign in 1948, then Project Grudge, and finally, the better-known Project Blue Book, which lasted until 1969. The voice of the narrator remains gentle and measured, describing rooms filled with typewriters, files, and blurred photographs. Scientists and officers sifted through thousands of reports, most explained as weather, misidentification, or illusion. Yet, a small fraction remained unsolved, cases that resisted logic. These were labeled unidentified, not because they were alien, but because they could not yet be explained. The calm narration emphasizes this distinction between mystery and proof, between belief and evidence. For those listening in the quiet of their rooms, the story takes on a rhythm of quiet wonder. The narrator describes how radar operators began to see strange blips, metallic echoes that appeared and vanished without pattern. Pilots would confirm visual contact, yet nothing was found on the ground. The skies had become alive with questions. Some believed these sightings marked the beginning of a new era, first contact with beings from another world. Others argued they reflected human psychology more than alien presence. The gentle voice weaves these perspectives together, noting that the truth, perhaps, lies somewhere between the stars and the mind. Psychologists of the time began to study the growing phenomenon. Carl Jung, the great analyst of dreams and symbols, wrote of UFOs as a modern myth. He believed they were projections of collective anxiety, a reflection of humanity's search for wholeness during an age of fragmentation. Jung's interpretation was not dismissive, rather, it treated UFOs as both real and symbolic. People saw them because they needed to see them, a unifying image of hope and mystery in an uncertain world. The narrator speaks slowly here, letting the listener absorb this idea, that sometimes what we witness in the sky may be a reflection of what is happening within. Yet for every psychological explanation, there were cases that defied easy answers. Radar records confirmed simultaneous detections from multiple locations. Military pilots described structured objects, metallic and intelligent in movement. Even civilian witnesses, farmers, teachers, police officers, reported similar shapes, discs, triangles, and luminous spheres that moved silently against the wind. The narrator lists these details calmly, without drama, grounding the wonder in careful observation. These were not the tales of dreamers, but of people trained to watch, to measure, to report. And when their stories aligned, the line between science and mystery blurred further. By the 1950s, UFOs had entered popular culture as both fascination and fear. Hollywood produced films like The Day the Earth Stood Still and Earth versus the Flying Saucers, projecting human hopes and anxieties onto the silver screen. To some, the visitors were saviors, to others, invaders. The narrator draws parallels between these depictions and the cultural climate, how atomic age uncertainty shaped the archetype of the alien. Humanity had split the atom and reached for the stars, but also feared its own power. The skies became a canvas for our conscience, painted with the shapes of both wonder and warning. The pacing remains slow and hypnotic, the tone warm but factual. The narrator explains how, as technology improved, so did skepticism. Scientists pointed out that atmospheric phenomena, temperature inversions, and even celestial reflections could create illusions of flying objects. Pilots were subject to fatigue, optical distortions, and radar interference. Still, the reports persisted. Each time explanations were offered, a few cases slipped through untouched, shining like small stars of uncertainty in an otherwise explainable night. These few unsolved cases, quiet, stubborn, and enduring, are what kept the mystery alive. As the section draws toward its conclusion, the narration returns to the vast desert where it began. The Roswell debris, the flickering radar screens, the stories whispered across airwaves, all merge into a single sense of longing. Whether craft from beyond or misread wonders of nature, UFOs became symbols of humanity's desire for connection. We were not merely watching the sky, we were searching for ourselves within it. The gentle tone invites the listener to imagine the hush of a military hangar at night, the glow of a desk lamp over classified files, the weight of unanswered questions resting quietly in the air. The narrator's voice fades to a near whisper, reflecting on the transition that has occurred. The ancient myths of fire in the heavens have evolved into data on glowing screens. Yet the feeling is the same pulse of wonder, the same sense of being observed by something vast and unknown. The section ends not with conclusion, but with calm anticipation, that as humanity looks deeper into the stars, the line between mystery and understanding will continue to shift. The listener is left in a serene state of curiosity, ready to explore not only what is seen in the sky, but what stirs within the human spirit each time. While the skies filled with strange lights and whispers of distant visitors, another mystery quietly endured closer to home, the world of spirits. Long before radar screens and telescopes, people had already been trying to communicate with unseen presences. The line between UFOs and the supernatural has always been delicate, almost invisible, and during the 20th century, both realms began to overlap in curious ways. The narrator's voice slows to a soft cadence, drawing the listener inward. This section unfolds not with fear, but with reflection, a gentle reminder that the human search for meaning has always reached both outward to the stars and inward to the soul. The story begins in the dim parlors of the 19th century. Candlelight flickers over polished tables as people gather in silence, hands lightly touching. A faint tapping begins, 3 knocks, then 4, and a hush falls over the room. This was the world of spiritualism, a movement that promised to bridge the divide between life and death. It started humbly with the Fox Sisters of New York in 1848, who claimed to hear spirit rappings in their home. Whether trick or truth, their seances ignited a worldwide fascination. For the first time, contact with invisible beings seemed not divine or terrifying, but intimate. The narrator describes this era with calm imagery, lace curtains drawn, voices whispering questions to the beyond, hearts full of hope and loss. Spiritualism spread rapidly across continents, finding a deep resonance in societies struggling with grief and change. Wars, epidemics, and industrialization had left many yearning for reassurance that death was not the end. Mediums and table tappers offered that comfort, claiming to channel the words of departed loved ones. In Britain, upper-class salons became stages for spirit communication, while in America, even skeptics attended seances just to see. The Society for Psychical Research was founded in 1882, drawing respected scientists and scholars who sought to test the reality of these claims. Calmly, the narrator notes how curiosity was beginning to merge with scientific discipline, how mystery and reason were learning, awkwardly, to coexist. The gentle rhythm of the narration invites the listener to imagine early experiments in ghost detection. Researchers like William Crookes, a respected chemist, and Sir Oliver Lodge, a physicist, took the unseen seriously. They built instruments to measure temperature changes, record sounds, and photograph faint lights that mediums claimed were spirit energy. To them, the supernatural was not superstition. It was an undiscovered branch of science. The tone remains soothing, never skeptical or credulous, allowing the listener to drift through this period of wonder when science itself was still half enchanted. As time moved into the 20th century, technology began to influence the shape of belief. Cameras, radios, and later, tape recorders became new tools for contact. The narrator explains gently how the birth of photography created a new kind of ghost story, not seen in the corner of one's eye, but printed in silver and shadow. Strange mists appeared in family portraits, translucent figures stood behind the living. Some were proven tricks of exposure, yet others remained puzzling. When the first radio enthusiasts began hearing unexplained voices through static, they wondered if they had tuned into another realm. What began as spiritualism slowly evolved into a technological search for proof of the unseen, a mirror, in many ways, of how UFO research would later unfold. The narration flows like a calm tide, drawing parallels between the spirit world and the extraterrestrial. Both promised answers to the same questions. Are we alone? What happens when we die? Are we being watched, guided, or visited by other intelligences? Each phenomenon appeared to adapt to its era, ghosts speaking through mediums in candlelight, aliens appearing as lights in radar echoes. The same longing underlies both, the need for connection with something beyond human understanding. Psychologists suggest that these experiences, whether real or imagined, reflect our deepest emotional architecture, the part of the human mind that reaches instinctively toward mystery when logic falls silent. The narrator moves softly through history, observing that encounters with spirits often carried a sense of calm rather than terror. Many witnesses described feelings of peace, familiarity, even love, in the presence of what they could not explain. In some near-death experiences, people spoke of radiant beings, not unlike the luminous visitors described in certain UFO cases. Scholars have noticed that both phenomena often involve similar sensations: bright light, paralysis or floating, a sense of timelessness, and profound transformation afterward. Perhaps, the narration suggests, both are glimpses of the same hidden dimension, one that expresses itself differently depending on the observer's beliefs. During the mid-20th century, when UFOs filled the headlines, spiritualism quietly adapted once again. Mediums began reporting contact not just with the dead, but with entities claiming to come from other worlds. The narrator's tone remains soft and steady, describing the emergence of space brothers in the 1950s, beings of light who spoke through human channels, offering messages of peace and warning about atomic weapons. Groups like the Theria Society in Britain or George Van Tassel's gatherings at Giant Rock in California blurred the line between seance and science fiction. They were not summoning spirits, but communicating with cosmic minds. The voice of the narrator lingers gently on this transformation, how the vocabulary changed, but the yearning stayed the same. Meanwhile, psychologists and sociologists began to notice parallels between UFO contactees and spiritual mediums. Both described entering trance-like states, both felt chosen to deliver messages, and both faced skepticism from the world. Researchers debated whether these experiences were internal visions, symbolic communications, or actual interactions with external intelligence. The narration does not judge. Instead, it allows each possibility to float like a feather in still air. In the calm rhythm of the story, listeners are invited to see that perhaps the difference between a ghost and an alien is not as great as we think. Both could be facets of a single, multifaceted mystery. Throughout this section, the narrator keeps returning to one quiet truth, that belief itself can be a bridge. The power of human attention, emotion, and intention may shape what we perceive. Quantum physicists and consciousness researchers, even today, explore whether observation can influence matter, an echo of what mystics and mediums have always claimed. The calm voice suggests that maybe the spirits we once sensed were not remnants of the dead, but reflections of consciousness itself, and that the luminous visitors of the skies might be drawn by the same invisible force of awareness. As the section nears its close, the narration slows even further, letting silence fill the space between words. The listener is reminded that the unknown often moves gently, not in explosions of revelation, but in quiet moments of connection. Whether through the whisper of a departed loved one or the distant shimmer of an unidentified light, both worlds remind us that reality may be wider than our senses allow. The story suggests that perhaps the true encounter lies not in the outer world, but in the inner one, where memory, hope, and mystery meet. The section concludes with soft reflection. The narrator paints a scene of an old Victorian study at dusk, filled with the faint hum of a radio and the quiet tick of a clock. Outside, the evening star glows on the horizon, a reminder that the same sky which holds the spirits of the departed may also carry visitors from far beyond. As the light fades, the narrator whispers that these two mysteries, the spiritual and the extraterrestrial, may be twins born from the same ancient wonder. Humanity's search for the unseen has never truly been about what lies beyond, but about what awakens within us when we dare to look. Some encounters, the narrator begins softly, are not born of fear, but of quiet curiosity. In the long catalogue of UFO and spirit phenomena, a few stories shine differently, gentle, dreamlike experiences that leave witnesses not terrified, but comforted. These are the moments when the unknown brushes close without menace, offering serenity instead of shock. As the voice flows like calm water, the listener is invited to drift through such encounters, true accounts wrapped in mystery, but told through the peaceful rhythm of a bedtime story. Each one reveals a side of the unexplained that feels almost sacred, as if the visitors, whatever they are, understand something about calm that humans often forget. The first story unfolds along the coast of Sweden in the early 1950s. Fishermen from a small harbor town awoke one dawn to see orbs of pale blue light hovering just above the water. The lights moved slowly, never flickering, reflecting perfectly on the glassy sea. One fisherman rowed closer, expecting to find a ship or a flare, but the lights remained silent, weightless, almost curious. They followed him gently for a few minutes, then drifted upward and dissolved into the fog. When he returned to shore, the others noticed a strange detail. His skin and clothes smelled faintly of ozone, like air after lightning. Calmly, the narrator describes how Swedish authorities investigated and found nothing to explain it. No storms, no aircraft, no flares. The fishermen spoke of the experience without fear. One man said it felt as if the sea was breathing light. The account faded from newspapers, but it lived on in local memory as something beautiful rather than frightening. The next story moves softly to the American South, the banks of the Pascagoula River in Mississippi, 1973. Two shipyard workers, Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker, were fishing under a dark October sky when they saw a glowing oval descend silently nearby. From it, they said, emerged three beings, robotic, almost insect-like, yet strangely gentle in their movements. The men felt paralyzed but not harmed, and described being lifted into the craft where a single lidless eye examined them. Minutes later, they were back on the shore, dazed but calm. When they reported the incident to police, they were secretly recorded in a private room. The tape captured them whispering, shaken but sincere, repeating that they were not drunk and that whatever had happened felt strangely peaceful. Decades later, investigators noted that the men's physiological responses, heart rate, breathing, micro-expressions, matched those of people recalling traumatic events. Yet, when they described the beings, their tone softened. Hickson often said he felt no fear, only awe, as if he had witnessed something far beyond comprehension. The narrator pauses, letting the stillness hang, before remarking that gentle encounters often change people not by scaring them, but by expanding their sense of reality. From the deep south, the voice carries us across oceans to the quiet countryside of England in the early 1990s. A woman named Anne Roper, living alone near Wiltshire, often walked her dog through misty fields at dusk. One evening she noticed a soft humming, like a distant tuning fork, and saw two tall, translucent figures standing near a crop field. They were faint, shimmering outlines that seemed to glow from within, their edges blurring into the twilight, and felt no fear. Instead, she described an overwhelming calm, as if the air itself had changed. The figures turned toward her slowly, then simply faded into the mist. Later, she found that the crops where they stood were gently bent in perfect circles, not crushed or burned. Local investigators documented the marks and recorded Anne's statement. She never sought attention, and her story remained quiet, passed between researchers like a fragile leaf. To her, the encounter was a blessing, an affirmation that there is more to life than we can measure. The narrator's tone remains steady and warm, guiding the listener deeper into the heart of these experiences. Each story, though mysterious, carries a sense of purpose rather than chaos. Psychologists who have studied similar cases note that witnesses often emerge with profound changes in attitude. They become less afraid of death, more compassionate, more attuned to nature. This pattern mirrors what is known as the contact transformation effect. Whether the experience is spiritual, psychological, or something else entirely, it seems to awaken in people a quiet reverence for existence. The narrator notes this gently, connecting it to ancient traditions where encounters with luminous beings, angels, ancestors, star visitors, were seen not as invasions, but as moments of divine initiation. The narration flows onward like a lullaby, exploring the possible explanations for such serenity. Neuroscientists suggest that these peaceful experiences may occur in altered states of consciousness, between wakefulness and dreaming. During such states, the brain releases waves associated with relaxation, creativity, and heightened perception. Sleep paralysis, temporal lobe stimulation, or hypnagogic imagery could explain the vividness of the visions. Yet, as the narrator adds softly, scientific language can describe how an experience occurs, but not always why it feels sacred. Even if the mind is the instrument, the music may come from somewhere else. The listener is encouraged to rest in that ambiguity, to feel comfort rather than confusion in the mystery. In the American Midwest, another gentle encounter took place in 1966, near a quiet town in Ohio. A family driving home at night noticed a glowing object following them along the highway. It matched their speed for several miles, then drifted ahead and stopped above the road. The father pulled over, stepped out, and felt an odd stillness. No wind, no sound of insects. The light pulsed once, softly, like a heartbeat, then rose vertically into the stars. The family sat in silence afterward, realizing that what they had witnessed felt strangely intimate, as though it had acknowledged them before leaving. When they later discussed it with local reporters, the children described the object as beautiful, like a new moon that knew we were there. The story faded from news archives, but psychologists analyzing the transcript decades later remarked on the emotional consistency of their memories. There was no fear, only wonder. The narrator uses these accounts not to prove, but to illustrate. The unknown, when it appears in gentle form, seems to bypass intellect and speak directly to emotion. Listeners are invited to imagine the soft glimmer of light over calm water, the hum of energy in a quiet field, the unspoken feeling that something vast and kind has noticed them. These stories, the narrator suggests, are less about evidence than about experience. They remind us that not every mystery demands an answer. Some exist only to awaken awe. Cultural scholars have observed that the gentle encounter is often missing from popular UFO narratives. Modern media tends to favor fear, the abduction, the invasion, the conspiracy. Yet, beneath the surface, there exists a quieter tradition, experiences that heal rather than harm, that soothe rather than shock. In indigenous communities, encounters with sky beings were often described as teachings. In modern times, many contactees report feelings of unity and empathy following their experiences. The narrator reflects on this pattern as the soundscape softens, like night wind brushing through tall grass. It is possible, they muse, that these encounters, real or imagined, are part of an ongoing dialogue between humanity and the unknown. A whisper reminding us that the universe is not hostile, only immense. As the section moves toward its conclusion, the narration slows even further, inviting reflection. Each of these stories, whether on quiet coasts, empty highways, or fog-draped fields, shares a single thread: the presence of peace. Witnesses speak of time slowing, of being enveloped in stillness, of feeling both small and infinite. Scientists, theologians, and skeptics can debate origins endlessly, but the emotional core remains the same. Something beyond understanding reached out gently, and those who felt it were changed. The final moments of this section return to a tranquil image, a world asleep under a canopy of stars. Somewhere, a light moves silently above the horizon, not to frighten, but to remind. The narrator's voice lowers to a whisper, assuring the listener that mystery need not always arrive with noise or power. Sometimes, it comes softly, like moonlight on water, offering no answers, only a feeling of connection. Whether one calls them spirits, visitors, or visions, the effect is the same: a deep, wordless comfort that lingers long after the light fades. As the story deepens, the narrator's tone becomes slower, steadier, inviting the listener into the part of the night where imagination meets the boundary of reality. Here, the mystery of UFOs and spirits takes on a new shape, one defined not just by personal encounters, but by the gaze of governments, institutions, and the machinery of modern knowledge. The gentle wonder of eyewitness stories meets the cold precision of classified documents, radar data, and official denials. It is in this contrast, the warmth of human experience and the chill of bureaucracy, that the mystery becomes even more fascinating. The narrator reminds us that, despite decades of technological progress, the phenomenon has remained elusive, like mist slipping through a net. The calm voice assures the listener, this is not a story of conspiracies or panic, but of quiet persistence, of how humanity's most rational institutions still struggle to make sense of the irrational. The modern age of UFO investigation began not in shadows, but in daylight. In 1947, Kenneth Arnold, a civilian pilot, reported seeing 9 metallic objects flying near Mount Rainier in Washington state. His description, like saucers skipping on water, would coin the term flying saucer, changing the vocabulary of mystery forever. Within days, newspapers across America filled with similar reports. The U.S. Air Force, still new after World War II, began to collect and catalog the sightings under projects with names that sound almost poetic in hindsight: Sign, Grudge, and Blue Book. The narrator's voice lingers on these names, noting that behind each one was a struggle between skepticism and belief. Scientists wanted data, the military wanted control. Thousands of reports were gathered, but only a small percentage were ever labeled unidentified. Yet, even in those few cases, witnesses included pilots, radar operators, and credible professionals. As the decades passed, the pattern grew familiar: a sighting, an investigation, an official statement dismissing it as weather, balloons, or optical illusions. But sometimes the explanations didn't fit. The narrator gently describes the famous Mantell incident of 1948, when a Kentucky Air National Guard pilot pursued a strange silver object into the clouds and never returned. The official report blamed a misidentified balloon, but other pilots noted the craft's incredible climb rate, something no known balloon could achieve. Mantell's crash became a cautionary tale within the Air Force, a reminder that curiosity could cost lives. From then on, official investigations became quieter, more cautious, as if acknowledging the mystery risked giving it power. In the 1950s and 60s, the Cold War cast a long shadow. UFO sightings surged, and governments around the world treated them as potential security threats. The narrator's tone remains soothing, but the content deepens with historical tension. Documents later declassified revealed that both the U.S. and Soviet Union monitored UFO reports closely, fearing that unidentified objects might be advanced enemy aircraft. Yet, amidst the paranoia, some researchers within the military quietly pursued the question of whether these objects might be something else entirely. Project Blue Book's final report, released in 1969, publicly declared UFOs to be of no national security concern, but internally, certain cases were left unexplained. The narrator describes how, decades later, when those files were released, ordinary citizens could finally read the raw witness testimonies. The reports were clinical but strangely poetic. Object appeared as luminous disk. No sound. Maneuvers inconsistent with known aircraft. In 1976, a remarkable event unfolded in Tehran, Iran. Military pilots scrambled to intercept a luminous object that appeared on radar and to the naked eye. As they approached, their instrumentation failed, radar, radio, and weapons systems all shutting down, only to return once they turned away. Intelligence officers documented the event in a classified cable, calling it an outstanding report due to its credibility. The narrator emphasizes the calm astonishment that pervades such official language, technical, emotionless, yet filled with quiet awe. Even governments, with all their tools and power, were humbled by the unknown. Moving gently forward in time, the narration touches on the 1980 Rendlesham Forest incident in England. UFOs. Military personnel stationed at a British airbase reported strange lights descending into the woods. They investigated on foot, recording their observations with handheld devices. Their voices, captured on audio tape, remain eerily calm. There it is again, moving through the trees. Physical traces, indentations in the ground, elevated radiation readings, were later documented. Yet, official inquiries led nowhere definitive. The narrator reflects that perhaps the military's greatest discomfort was not with what happened, but with admitting that they did not know. In recent years, the boundary between secrecy and disclosure has blurred further. The narrator's voice grows softer, almost conspiratorial but never alarmist. In 2017, major media outlets revealed the existence of a Pentagon program known as the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, or ATIP. Funded quietly between 2007 and 2012, it studied encounters between military pilots and unidentified aerial phenomena, objects that performed maneuvers beyond known physics. Videos released by the Department of Defense, showing small white shapes darting across radar screens, reignited public interest. The pilots' voices, calm but puzzled, described something not from this world. The narrator pauses, allowing the listener to feel the weight of that phrase. Not from this world. Not necessarily alien, but certainly unknown. The narrator then shifts perspective, inviting the listener to imagine what it feels like to be inside those institutions, to be the radar technician seeing impossible readings, the intelligence analyst trying to fit a mystery into a report. Bureaucracy, the narrator suggests, is designed to create order, but the unknown resists classification. When phenomena do not obey known rules, the official response is often silence. Governments are not necessarily hiding the truth, they may simply be unable to name it. And naming, the narrator reminds us gently, is humanity's oldest form of control. The unnameable remains unsettling even to those in power. Throughout history, similar struggles have unfolded in spiritual realms as well. Religious institutions, too, have often confronted unexplained manifestations, apparitions, visions, or messages that defied doctrine. The narrator draws a quiet parallel. Just as governments catalog the sky's mysteries, churches once documented miracles. In both cases, the impulse is the same: to observe, to interpret, to contain. And yet, both the spiritual and the scientific archives are filled with anomalies that refuse containment. Lights that move against the wind. Voices that speak without sound. The unknown, it seems, moves between these systems of belief, revealing just enough to inspire awe, then fading before it can be understood. The narrator's voice, low and melodic, begins to weave these threads together. What we see in government archives and classified reports is not just evidence, but reflection, our collective effort to define what cannot be defined. Each investigation, whether military or mystical, tells a story of human limitation. Scientists measure, theologians interpret, officials redact, but the mystery endures. It does not yield to technology or faith, it simply adapts, changing shape as our understanding evolves. Perhaps the narrator muses, that is its nature, to remain just beyond certainty, to remind us that even in the age of satellites and sensors, wonder still exists. A gentle breeze of thought closes the section. Maybe the UFO and spirit phenomena are not two separate mysteries, but different expressions of one vast, unknowable presence, observed through the filters of culture, technology, and time. Governments, despite their data and satellites, might be staring at the same enigma that shamans and monks once felt in candlelit visions. The night sky, filled with distant lights, becomes a mirror for our endless questions. And so, as the narrator's tone softens into near whisper, the listener is reminded that knowledge and mystery are not enemies, they are dance partners in an eternal waltz. The section ends on a tranquil note. Somewhere, in an office deep within a government archive, lies a stack of old files marked unexplained. The ink has faded, the paper yellowed, yet the mystery inside remains untouched. Outside, the stars still shine with the same calm light they have always cast. The narrator's final words drift like a sigh. Even the most powerful among us, when they look up, are still just dreamers beneath the same sky. The narrator's tone grows warmer again, inviting the listener to rest in the soft glow of the next idea. The way these mysteries, these gentle encounters and unexplained lights, have shaped not only government archives and secret reports, but the soul of culture itself. The voice, low and rhythmic, reminds the listener that every generation has used story to understand what it cannot name. The UFO and the spirit, though clothed in different imagery, have always been mirrors of the same longing, the human desire to believe that we are not alone, that something watches and cares, that there is meaning in the great, silent expanse above. Culture, the narrator explains softly, is where these mysteries breathe most freely. Through art, literature, film, and folklore, they evolve, taking forms that soothe or challenge, that teach or terrify. In the early days of the modern UFO phenomenon, the 1950s and 1960s, the public imagination was still fresh with post-war optimism and fear. The narrator describes how the silver saucer became an icon almost overnight. Magazine covers showed gleaming discs hovering above suburban homes. Movies like The Day the Earth Stood Still and Close Encounters of the Third Kind transformed the cold, unknown visitor into a symbol of hope or warning. Audiences left theaters not just entertained but unsettled, wondering if these stories were preparing them for something real. Meanwhile, radio shows and pulp novels turned alien contact into moral parables about peace, fear, and human arrogance. Even when the lights were fictional, the feelings they stirred were ancient, the same awe our ancestors felt before sacred fires and wandering stars. The narrator pauses, allowing the listener to drift through the decades. In the 1970s and 1980s, the UFO mystery intertwined with the era's growing fascination with spirituality and consciousness. People began to describe encounters not as invasions but as transformations. The term contactee replaced abductee in certain circles. Books like Communion by Whitley Strieber and Passport to Magonia by Jacques Vallée suggested that the phenomenon might not come from outer space at all, but from some parallel reality interwoven with our own. Vallée, a scientist and thinker, proposed that UFOs might act like a control system, symbols designed to evolve with human culture, changing shape to fit our expectations. The narrator notes how this idea bridges science and mythology, that the visitors might be messengers, reflecting back the stage of human consciousness at any given time. Throughout the world, cultures began weaving the unknown into art and music. In Japan, filmmakers depicted glowing orbs as spirits of nature. In Latin America, folk songs told of luminous beings guiding travelers through storms. Indigenous traditions in Australia and the Americas already contain sky beings in their creation stories, ancient ancestors descending in beams of light to teach or heal. The narrator's voice remains calm, reverent, as if walking slowly through a gallery of human imagination. Every culture, it seems, has painted the same mystery in different colors. What we call aliens today might once have been called gods, angels, jinn, or visitors from the dreamtime. Across time, the unknown has always spoken in symbols suited to its listeners. The narrator continues softly, describing how, as the 20th century turned into the 21st, these mysteries found new life in digital culture. The internet became a vast campfire where stories multiplied. People shared videos of strange lights, ghostly figures, and inexplicable patterns in the sky. Forums, podcasts, and YouTube channels turned collective curiosity into a form of community. Listeners, perhaps much like the one now drifting toward sleep, would spend quiet nights scrolling through witness testimonies or listening to calm voices recounting encounters with the unknown. What began as isolated stories became shared experiences, a digital folklore that connects millions of people across the world. Even skeptics, the narrator remarks, participate in the ritual by questioning, debunking, and debating. The act of wondering itself keeps the phenomenon alive. Psychologists studying this cultural wave note that belief in UFOs and spirits often rises during times of uncertainty. The 20th century's wars, pandemics, and technological revolutions all seem to awaken an increased interest in the unexplained. The narrator's tone is gentle but thoughtful. When the world feels unpredictable, people turn toward mysteries that offer cosmic perspective. To believe in something greater, whether benevolent or mysterious, is a way of finding balance. The unknown, paradoxically, gives comfort because it expands the boundaries of what's possible. When reality feels small, the idea that we are part of something vast becomes a kind of lullaby for the anxious mind. The narrator invites the listener to picture a quiet evening somewhere in 1969, a family gathered around their black and white television. The moon landing is being broadcast live. Humanity has touched the sky for the first time, and yet, even at that pinnacle of achievement, the question lingers, who else might be out there? The narrator observes that our cultural fascination with UFOs and spirits intensified not because we stopped fearing the unknown, but because we began to miss it. Science explained so much that mystery became precious again. The unexplained became not an enemy of reason, but a reminder of wonder. In that sense, every UFO documentary, every ghost story, every whispered bedtime tale serves a quiet spiritual function. It restores the balance between logic and awe. The narrator speaks softly about how art mirrors this duality. Filmmakers like Stanley Kubrick, Steven Spielberg, and Denis Villeneuve have used cosmic mysteries to explore human emotion, loneliness, hope, transcendence. Painters have depicted glowing beings at the edges of dreams. Musicians have written lullabies inspired by starlight and space. Even the act of listening to a story about UFOs or spirits before sleep, the narrator notes, is an ancient ritual in modern form. It connects the listener to that primal rhythm of wondering before surrendering to the unknown realm of dreams. Culture, therefore, becomes both archive and bridge, a way of preserving awe and transmitting it gently from one generation to the next. The narrator now turns to the influence of these mysteries on belief systems themselves. Over time, UFO and spirit phenomena have blurred the boundaries between religion, myth, and science. In the 1990s and 2000s, New spiritual movements emerge describing extraterrestrials as benevolent guardians or teachers, echoes of angelic traditions cloaked in modern imagery. Sociologists studying these groups found that their beliefs often centered on peace, ecology, and unity rather than fear. The voice reminds the listener that belief, whether grounded in faith or speculation, is not about proof but meaning. These stories endure because they give shape to invisible longings, to connect, to be seen, to feel part of something endless. Cultural historians have even noted parallels between the imagery of UFO encounters and ancient visionary art: halos, beams of light, hovering discs, beings of radiance. Whether these similarities suggest a shared archetype or a deeper continuity, the result is the same. The human psyche, across time, tends to dream in symbols of light. Light as guidance, revelation, and transformation. The narrator lingers on that image, light as language. Perhaps they muse what we call encounters, are moments when consciousness itself flickers into visibility, reminding us of our connection to the vast unknown. As the section moves toward its close, the narrator draws these threads together gently, like tucking a blanket around the listener's imagination. The cultural influence of UFOs and spirits, they suggest, is not measured in belief or disbelief, but in the quiet power of fascination. Every time a film is made, a song written, or a conversation whispered under starlight, the mystery deepens its roots in our collective story. These tales of visitors and phantoms do not simply entertain, they keep us humble. They remind us that no matter how advanced we become, we are still children beneath the infinite sky, gazing upward, waiting for a sign. The voice lowers now, carrying the listener into calm reflection. The stories of the unknown, whether from governments, artists, or ordinary people, form a single thread that weaves through human history. They are stories about longing, about connection, about listening to the silence between stars. The narrator's final words of the section drift like a lullaby. Perhaps the greatest mystery is not what watches us from the dark, but why we still look up, night after night, searching for a reflection of ourselves in the light that never fades. The voice lowers to a soft, steady rhythm, carrying the listener gently into the modern age of mystery. The world has changed, technology has grown sharper, science more precise. Yet the unknown still lingers just beyond reach. Governments now speak of unidentified aerial phenomena instead of UFOs, trading fear for curiosity. The language itself has evolved, a quiet sign that humanity no longer laughs at mystery but listens to it. The narrator describes how, across the globe, pilots, scientists, and officials study strange lights that defy explanation. Radar data, cockpit videos, and eyewitness accounts reveal flight patterns that move without sound or visible propulsion. Reports remain cautious. No conclusions, no denial, only the quiet admission that something remains unexplained. The mystery, once dismissed, is now handled with care. But beyond technology, the narrator whispers, there is another investigation, one within the human spirit. Psychologists note that encounters with the unknown often bring feelings of calm, unity, or timelessness. Perhaps, the narrator suggests, these experiences are not interruptions from outside reality but moments when consciousness expands, touching the deeper structure of existence. Even now, under glowing cities and silent skies, people still look up, wondering. Scientists call it data. Mystics call it revelation. The narrator calls it remembrance, the universe gently reminding us that discovery is not only about knowledge, but connection. The voice grows quieter. Perhaps the unknown does not hide from us. Perhaps it waits, for minds still enough to see. In that stillness, the mystery feels near, tender, and vast. The listener breathes slowly, the world softens, and the story rests in balance between reason and wonder. The voice now softens to a whisper, inviting reflection rather than discovery. After all the tales of lights and shadows, the question remains, what do these mysteries truly mean? The narrator suggests that perhaps the search for UFOs and spirits is not about what lies beyond, but what lies within. Across history, people have looked to the skies or into the dark corners of their homes and felt something looking back. A sense of being seen, recognized by something vast and kind. Each era has given the unknown a different name: gods, ancestors, visitors, consciousness. Yet all these names describe the same feeling: a meeting with wonder. The narrator explains that mystery adapts to our understanding. It appears as technology to one mind, as spirit to another. What matters is not form, but connection. In every unexplained light or gentle encounter, there is an invitation to pause, to feel awe, and to remember that we are not alone. The unknown, the narrator says, is not a void but a mirror. It reflects our longing to belong, our endless curiosity, and our need for beauty. To study these mysteries is to study the self. Whether we call them phenomena or visions, they remind us that the universe is not finished speaking. As the listener breathes deeply, drifting toward sleep, the voice fades into calm assurance. The mystery endures because it is part of us, alive in thought, dream, and wonder. The voice now becomes softer than ever, wrapping the listener in stillness. The journey has led through centuries of stories, science, and belief, only to arrive here, in quiet acceptance. The narrator explains that every mystery, when followed to its end, circles back to peace. We search for answers, but perhaps the unknown's true gift is serenity. The narrator reminds the listener that we are made of the same stardust as the cosmos we question. The light that travels across galaxies also shines within us. To look at the night sky is to see our own reflection stretched across eternity. The unknown is not distant. It is within every breath, every heartbeat, every dream. As sleep draws near, the voice slows, each word falling like soft rain. The mysteries of UFOs and spirits, once so grand, now feel intimate, whispers of the same consciousness that binds all things. You are part of the great mystery, the narrator murmurs. The universe is not outside you, it lives through you. The final words dissolve into silence. Close your eyes. Let go of the questions. The stars are watching, the night is gentle, and the mystery holds you. You are home.